real. The emotions are still raw. These kids are still struggling. And we came to this school, the Leadership and Public Service School, to meet some young people who should be at the prime of their lives and carefree, and they're still overcoming grief, the loss of loved ones, the loss of their former self, the loss of the learning experience that should have allowed them to grow in a different environment. And they all talked about being drawn into this dark digital world where they did not have friends face to face. And so it was very disconnecting for them. So to hear from them as I launched this series back in the spring, for me to personally hear from teenagers who are affected, is driving me even further to the conclusion that more must be done. It's not just about stemming the learning loss, which is what we proposed resources to help deal with that last summer, but it's also about the loss of that social connection, which is having a negative effect on young people still today. So what we're talking about today is awarding $5.1 million to school-based mental health programs. We announced the opening of this program in August. Today we announced that the first schools are receiving anywhere from $25,000 to $45,000 as seed money for them to develop a program where they can find a way to reach out to these young people, help support for their local clinicians and their guidance counselors who play critical roles, but also building a full-time program, training staff, and also giving them space. This builds on our $1 billion investment in my last budget, a continuum of care, everything from more beds for people on the streets so they can get the support they need in hospitals, support for people who are veterans, people with long-term PTSD, people with mental health challenges, people with substance abuse challenges. So that is all what we are focusing on. But today, the highlight was on these young people because the statistics are so alarming. The number of young people contemplating suicide, the number of young people feeling depression. The numbers are astronomical. And as adults and also as leaders, we have an obligation to try to return these young people to some semblance of normalcy even 3 years after the impact of the global pandemic. Any questions on topic first?
That's the max that can be.
Right. This is our first wave of $5.1 million that we're allocating, but we're going to look at this as seed money, find out what more they need, and look at it in the next budget as well. This was just to get on the ground and find out, let them apply for the resources. So that's what we announced here today. Sometimes it's just space they need for additional people. They may have support. They don't have the space for it. They need to retrofit space. They need to bring in a part-time worker. We'll let them have flexibility in how they use this.
Okay. Governor, good morning.
Good morning.
You're one of the fortunate few whose title and salary means that the congestion pricing toll won't be a financial burden for you. But there are surely going to be a countless number of families who are making well below six figures who are trying to figure out how they're going to fit this into their monthly budget. What do you say to them, and is there anything that can be done on the state level to offset this new financial cost?
As you know, congestion pricing is New York state law. It was adopted back in 2019. So this must go forward under state law. And what I found was when they're talking about numbers like $23 a visit, regardless of how many visits a day, I knew that would have a detrimental impact on families. So I wanted that number lower. That number released today is that be $15 per trip. So that's lower. But I also have to protect these families and their health and make sure there's clean air, not just for them today, but for the next generation. And also, we are blessed in this area to have world-class public transportation. And our buses can go faster when there's fewer cars on the streets. Our ambulance can get places sooner to save lives. Our firefighters can get to a burning building faster when there's not the congestion that is now paralyzing and clogging our streets. So we are going to be global leaders in this front. A few other places have tried it. I believe will be a model for the nation without creating an undue financial burden because we have public transportation at a very affordable cost for those families that are in need. We also have hours of operation where the cost will decline dramatically after 9 o'clock at night for someone who's having to work at a hospital and drive themselves home at the end of their shift, all the way till 5 in the morning, down to about $3.75. But we also have to do is make sure our air is clean, our transit is invested in. This helps me get the Interborough Express, which will help people who work in the outer boroughs who don't come into Manhattan. Also help with the Second Avenue subway, opening up transit deserts in Harlem and the Bronx so people can have access through public transportation to the best paying jobs that we have in the region right here in Manhattan. So I know there's going to be an impact, but we have to also deal with the larger picture, protecting and cleaning up our environment, protecting the quality of air, protecting mobility on our streets, and also protecting our financial stability of the MTA, because without that, it all collapses.
Quick follow, what do you say to the drivers who have no choice but to drive in, for whom mass transit is not an option?
That's why we are glad we could reduce it down to one trip a day. Original plans were every time you go in and out, you could end up having to pay upwards of $23. Those numbers would have been significantly higher. The numbers came down. It's only one trip a day, and truly to park in this city as well is already expensive. Already very expensive to park here. So I know people try very hard to go to a park and ride, try to find the alternatives to take the incredible system we have all the way from the far-reaching suburbs of Long Island and the Hudson Valley, Westchester, as well as the subway system that literally is almost on every corner. There's accessibility. So we have a gift that other areas do not have. This would not work in many other parts of the country. We're going to do it here. We're going to do it successfully, and we'll have the resources to make sure we keep investing in that lifeline of our region.
Right.
Okay, Governor, under the Adult Survivors Act, there was a filing against former Governor Andrew Cuomo by Brittany Commisso. She was a former aide. And you are mentioned in that filing. Commisso writes that she was removed from her executive chamber front office, et cetera, to the demeaning task of answering telephones in the Lieutenant Governor's office, until moved into other offices, including loss of overtime, ostracism, etc. Wondering what's your response to that? Is that an accurate depiction of what happened? And also, Mayor Eric Adams has his own filing under the Adult Survivors Act that he has been responding to. What do you make of these two lawsuits?
I'm proud I signed the Adult Survivors Act into law, because for too long, women who had to suffer in silence, whether it was a couple of years, a couple of months, or decades, can now come forward and talk about what happened to them. This is how we start purging our society from unwanted advances and assaults and degradation of women, particularly in the workplace. It has to stop. And that's why I'm glad I signed it into law. Sexual assault is unacceptable, always will be. With respect to the filing related to the former governor and the accusations against him, I simply have to say the reference to us is inaccurate, because as lieutenant governor, I had no control over where individual workers in the chamber were placed. And that was a decision made by other individuals. So we did not have control over that.
And have you had any contact with Ms. Commisso or her lawyer?
No,
Okay.
no,
And
no.
then another question. There's a bill, the non-compete bill that you have yet to sign pertaining to, it was passed in the legislature. Will you sign that bill, or do you think modifications should be made?
You know I don't comment on specific legislation ahead of time, but I'll tell you one of my values and my priorities is to protect low and middle income New Yorkers. Protect them. Give them mobility so they can have a better paying job and be able to have that flexibility. I'm not so worried about the very wealthy, well taken care of Wall Street hedge fund finance, top paid lawyers. They can take care of themselves. The other thing I have to balance is making sure that we don't drive businesses from our state, because it isn't a competitive environment. So if I'm looking out for workers, the best way I can look out for workers is to make sure they have a job to go to. So I have to strike the balance to make sure we take care of lower and middle income workers up to, say, $250,000, and also then know that those at higher levels are very well equipped to negotiate on their own behalfs. And I want to make sure the businesses stay here.
Last one, Tim.
Well, sort of jumping off that, the FTC sent you and your office a letter, I think it was Tuesday, laying out why they think non-compete clauses are bad for workers. I was wondering if you've seen that letter. And then separately, Bloomberg today is reporting that, or reported earlier today that Catherine Garcia is considering running for mayor again. If Catherine ran for mayor, would you support her and have that topic come up in any conversation?
Not at all. It's news to me. Everybody's going to be talked about. It seems like everybody in this city is going to be talked about. I will tell you right now, I'll make some news. I am not running for mayor of New York. So there you have it. There you have it. No, all kidding aside, I've had no conversations with Catherine. I will continue to work with the current administration, the Adams administration. We have so much to do on mental health and protecting our streets and protecting our citizens and dealing with the protests and the migrants. We have a lot of work to do, so I am laser focused on continuing to roll up my sleeves and work with Mayor Adams, full stop. The earlier part of the question was?
The FTC letter.
The FTC letter. There should be a federal policy on this. Once again, because otherwise, states will go to a state that's more friendly toward their interests, okay? I don't want there to be this competition between states. But as long as businesses have that mobility, I have to be cognizant of the fact that we have had an environment in this state for too long that has driven high net worth individuals and businesses out. And again, they can take care of themselves. I have to make sure that there's jobs for the low income, middle income workers and those who want to move into the upper stratosphere of income earners. I have to make sure those jobs are here for them. So I'll protect them. The other ones can take care of themselves, and they have more negotiation power, and let them work that out. But the bottom line is I would rather see overall a national policy where we won't have states playing off each other. That's what I think is the best policy.
Have you seen that letter, though? And you didn't solicit it, did you?
Did I solicit a letter?
Any letter or any input from that FTC?
I don't believe we have, but if that's a different answer, I don't know. I get a lot of letters. I'm sometimes told, but all I know is that I want the FTC to do the right thing and make this national.
There should be a national ban.
National, because that'll stop the competition between states. If I don't have a ban, I'm in a different position than states that do. I mean, this should be a national. I mean, I think most of these policies should be national.
But do you think that that's a policy that should be national? Do you think
You just
I just answer that. The reason is, otherwise,
you do?
I think that there should be a policy that is uniform, whether it's leaving out lower income individuals across the country and having it apply to higher income. I don't. That's a
Do
different.
you think there should be some ban at some level on non?
What I'm looking at right now is striking the right balance between protecting low and middle income workers, giving them flexibility to have mobility to go from job to job as they continue up the ladder of success. But those who are successful have a lot more negotiation power, and they're at the industries that are an important part of our economy here in New York, and that's something I'll let them work out. So there is a balance with what I have right now. I don't have a national policy in place right now. So my position, and all you're going to hear from me anymore on this, is that is something I'm looking at, again, reserving the right to do something not along. I reserve the right to make the final decision before, let's say, December 31st, 2023. And that's when you'll know all.
Governor,
All right.
on housing, you're going solo now, pursuing executive action as announced yesterday. Is that because you have not gained enough support either with labor, those in the legislature? Have they kind of, moved away, and are you just going ahead on your own here? And will that be successful in creating the 800,000 new units that you want by the end of the decade?
I've already made significant progress toward that goal. At the end of session, when it became apparent to me there was no interest in what I was proposing, which was bold, it was ambitious. We knew that from the start. And what people will learn about me is that I'm not afraid of a good fight if there's a worthy cause behind it. And that means I will take on the fact that 73% of New Yorkers think that housing is too high. I'll take on the fact that people are leaving our state because they can find lower cost housing in places like Florida and Texas, but also cold weather places that have the same tax structure as we do, like Connecticut, New Jersey. Why? Because those states built more housing and housing is more affordable. I recognize that. I'm trying to persuade others. It is a longer journey than I like, but I'm on that journey. I've started the conversation last January. In the scheme of states who have made success in this area, like California, it took them decades. So the process has started to educate members and educate the public that changes need to happen at the legislative level. I'll work with them. but I'm also have so many priorities. I'm not going to head down the same path that we did last year with the exact same plan, and in a year that is an election year for the members, where they have different focus and priorities, and I'm going to make sure we get there. Will it be in 10 years? I hope to be around long enough to make sure we do. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.